This here's the tale they don't speak in daylight. When the wind shifts across Dustwater Ridge and the canyon swallows the sun, the old folk close their shutters a little tighter. They remember the fire, the hanging, and the man who never raised his voice, but left behind silence deep enough to bury the dead. Elias Boone lived on the far side of the ridge, where the land creased into gullies and dry creeks. His cabin stood modest, one room wide, pine and sweat-bill by hand, nestled between a bent mesquite tree and a rock that bore his father's carving. Goats roamed the slope like stubborn ghosts, and rows of stringy green beans lined the patch of earth behind the cabin. Folks passing through would say the place looked peaceful, almost holy in the morning mist. But not many passed through, and Elias never invited them in. He was a quiet sort, Elias. Carried himself like the world was made of glass, and he'd sooner not touch it. Thin frame, sun-worn skin, slow blink. At 48, he'd never taken a wife, never drank in town, and never raised a hand unless it was to mend fence or pull weeds. People thought him simple. Not quite broken, just unfinished. A rancher's boy who never outgrew boyhood. Only his mother knew better. She was small and wiry, with knotted fingers and a voice like cracked leather. Her name was Ruth Boone, and she had once crossed a continent with Elias swaddled against her ribs. Raised him alone when war and hunger took his father. They shared everything, meals, chores, the silence between days. It was a quiet life, hard but gentle in its rhythm, and for Elias it was enough. On the morning it happened, Elias had gone to check the southern trail where the goats liked to wander. The sun had just crested the ridge, casting the world in hues of gold and rust. The air smelled of dry sage, and his boots kicked dust in lazy spirals. He hummed a hymn his mother used to sing when he was a boy, the notes barely audible above the wind. He was gone no more than 2 hours. When he crested the final ridge, the smoke met him first, thick, black, rising in a plume too steady to be a cook fire. His feet moved faster than his mind could catch. He ran, stumbling over rocks, heart rising into his throat like a stone. The cabin was ablaze, flames licking skyward, windows shattered. The goats bleated and scattered, one already burning in the pen. But Elias didn't see them. His eyes were fixed on the porch beam. She hung there like a warning. Her dress was scorched at the hem, and her bare feet swung gently in the heat waves. A rope bit deep into her neck, and her silver hair caught the firelight like wire. The front door was open, and the smell of kerosene clung thick in the air. Elias didn't make a sound. Not a cry, not a scream, not even her name. He stood, rooted like the carving stone, while the fire devoured everything behind her. His hands hung limp at his sides. His jaw twitched once, and then nothing, just stillness. Old Man Hobb saw it from his pasture down the hill. Said he rode up too late to do a damn thing, but caught a glimpse of riders tearing west, 5 of them, laughing, drunk, leaving a trail of smoke and spent whiskey bottles. Claimed it was the Kane brothers' gang, led by Garrett Kane himself, a bloated beast of a man who'd fought for the wrong side and never stopped killing. They accused Ruth of hiding someone, some drifter they'd been chasing. Thought she knew something. When she didn't talk, they lit the place. Then they hung her for spite. The sheriff showed up hours later, rode around asking useless questions, chewing tobacco and promising to file a report. Elias didn't look at him, didn't look at anyone. He cut her down with his own knife, laid her in the dirt like a child laying down a doll, brushing soot from her brow. He wrapped her in an old quilt and dug a grave beside the bent mesquite. By sundown, she was under the earth, the smoke still curling into the evening sky. He didn't pray, just sat beside the mound until the stars came out, and when they did, he stood. He walked into the blackened ruins of the house, stepping over ash and melted glass. The fire had spared nothing, bed, stove, table. Just a bit of the back wall remained, charred but standing, with the outline of a handprint scorched above the hearth. Elias stared at it for a long time, then turned. He walked to the barn and came back with 3 things: a coil of rope, a rusted spade, and a hunting knife in a sheath older than he was. Then he left. Didn't pack. Didn't tell a soul. Just walked into the hills, without looking back. In the weeks that followed, folks whispered. Some said they'd seen him near Hollow Creek, watching from the trees like a ghost. Others claimed he'd been seen outside the Kane gang's old camp, just standing on the ridge like he was counting the stars. But no one dared ask him what he was doing, because by then, a change had come over Elias Boone. The softness was gone. The stillness that once marked him as slow now made him something else, something cold, purposeful, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm. A month later, when they found one of the Kane brothers hanging upside down from a windmill, boots soaked in kerosene, folks started to wonder. By then, Elias was long gone, and to this day, when the wind howls through Dustwater Ridge, the old-timers lean close to their fires and murmur that saying, the one that rose up after the burning, after the hanged woman, after the man they thought was harmless walked into the hills with a shovel and a rope. Some men scream when the world breaks. Others sharpen silence into a noose. Dust settled over gray Mesa like a worn-out quilt, covering the wooden planks of Main Street, blurring boot tracks and bloodstains alike. The town was no stranger to sorrow. Its windows carried bullet holes like old scars, and its people had learned to speak in half-phrases, eyes always half-turned toward the door. The Kane brothers had made sure of that. They moved like a sickness through the land mean, wild-eyed men with hands too fast and mouths full of laughter soaked in liquor. They rode into towns, robbed, took what they pleased, and left silence in their wake. A preacher hanged in Cross Hollow, a butcher's boy shot in Coldwater Creek, and every trail between littered with hoof prints and grief. But something strange had begun to stir in the dust. Rumors rose like mist in the morning. A figure seen at the edge of the woods. A man crouched beside a dying fire. No one ever heard him come. No one ever saw where he went. A shadow with a face no one could quite recall, save for the eyes, calm, fixed, unreadable. Some said it was a ghost. Others whispered the name Elias Boone and spat to the side. Delilah Quinn didn't believe in ghosts. She believed in shotguns, sweat, and the work it took to keep the world from falling apart. Her saloon in Gray Mesa stood like a rusted lighthouse in a storm. 3 tables, 1 bar, 2 rooms upstairs, and a piano that hadn't been tuned since her husband bled out beside it 5 years ago. She'd buried him with her own hands, then kept on going. Delilah ran whiskey, watched over 3 orphan girls, and carried a double-barrel shotgun under the bar polished cleaner than any glass. She had no patience for cowards and no fear of dying, though she didn't fancy either. When men got rowdy, she set 'em straight. When they got stupid, she left the front door swinging behind them. That night, the wind brought someone different. He came in just after sunset, a figure blurred by dust and travel. Long coat, wide hat, boots caked with red dirt. He didn't speak when he stepped through the door. Didn't nod, didn't blink. Just walked slow and quiet up to the bar and set down a single silver coin. Delilah looked at the coin, then at the man. "You want whiskey or trouble?" she asked flatly. He said nothing, just reached inside his coat and pulled out a piece of folded parchment, worn soft at the creases. He placed it beside the coin and tapped it once with a calloused finger. Then he turned and walked out, boot heels clicking once on the floorboards, fading into the wind. Delilah unfolded the paper. A map, old hand-drawn, ink faded but deliberate. Red XS marked through it like wounds, places she knew. A gulch south of Dry Creek, an abandoned stable near Widow's Peak, a ridgeline just west of Dead Man's Hollow. Every one of them had seen Kane's gang at some point. Every one of them had stories soaked in blood. She didn't ask questions, only stared at the last X, deep in the canyon folds north of the Devil's Finger rock spire. She traced it with her thumb. Then she folded the map, pocketed the coin, and said nothing to anyone. Elias watched from the ridge that night, crouched among the rocks like a patient animal. Below, the Kane brothers hooted around a fire, skins shining in the flame as they drank, gambled, and passed a jug back and forth. One of them sang, a cruel song about a woman and a broken jaw. Another fired into the sky, just to hear the sound. Elias didn't move. He watched how they walked, watched how they lit their fires, noted which one always reached for his gun too slow, which one always sat with his back to the dark. They didn't know it yet, but they were teaching him how to kill them. Each night, a different camp, a different lesson. Elias tracked without sound, without light. He moved like he'd been born in shadow. He listened to them joke about the hanged woman. He heard one of them laugh about the way her son just stood there. He didn't flinch. He gathered names, learned the rhythm of their movement, and during the days, he scavenged rope from a broken well, nails from an old fence, oil from an abandoned mine shack, a hammer, a rusted brand. At one point, he found an old noose buried in a supply crate in the back of an overrun outpost. He took it, ran it through his fingers. The knot had held well. They called him slow once, but his fingers knew how to tie a bowline in the dark, how to slip a knot that would hold but not strangle, how to secure a line that could hoist a man by the ankles without slipping. People assumed he'd lived his life tending goats. They never asked what came before. Never asked why he always walked the perimeter twice before bedding down. Never wondered how a man could be so still for so long. There'd been a time when Elias wore blue, fought in a war that turned boys into whispers and men into shadows. He'd been a scout, not by choice, but by survival. A ghost between lines. He learned to hear footsteps in snow, tell lies from breath, and disappear before the crack of a twig could damn him. He buried that part of himself when he came home. Buried it so deep even he thought it was gone. But ashes make good fertilizer, and some seeds don't die. By the third week, the Kane brothers had started to twitch. 2 of their men vanished, no sound, no blood, just gone. The gang moved more often, built bigger fires, looked over their shoulders more. Kane himself laughed it off, but even his laugh sounded thinner now, like he was trying to convince the wind. Elias never left a trace. He wasn't ready yet. One night, Delilah found a bundle on her saloon steps, oilskin wrapped, tied neat. Inside, a list of names, a length of fresh rope, and a badge that had once belonged to the sheriff of Bent Hollow. The man had disappeared a year ago, last seen headed west with a warrant for Kane. She didn't cry, just poured herself a drink and lit a lantern. By now, she understood. The next morning, folks in Gray Mesa found something new scratched into the post outside the sheriff's office. Rough letters, carved deep with a knife that hadn't hesitated. Justice rides by night. The moon hung low and red, swollen like a blister in the sky above Widow's Spine. Down below, nestled in the black ribs of the canyon, the Kane gang's fire cracked loud in the silence. They were drunk again, half a jug deep and tossing cards into the dirt, laughing like they hadn't a care in the world. One of them sang, low and ugly, some old Confederate ballad turned into a taunt. Another sharpened a blade, whittling nothing into nothing. Boots stomped. Cigars flared. A woman's ribbon passed between hands like loot, and the whiskey made devils of them all. Elias watched from the ledge above, crouched so still that even the lizards didn't notice him. Dust coated his coat. Sweat dried beneath his collar. His breath came measured, like a hunter waiting for the wind to shift. He'd been following them for days, watching their routines, noting their laziness. They never posted a watch. They let their horses wander too far. They sat with their backs to the dark. Tonight, that would cost them. By the time the first scream ripped through the canyon, Elias was already gone. The man they called Ratty Jim had wandered off to piss in the brush. He didn't come back. Not a sound, not a whisper. Just vanished like smoke. When Brody went looking, he found him hanging from a low juniper, boots still warm, smoke curling from the soles like a chimney sigh. His eyes were wide, mouth slack, and the rope, new rough, tied with care, creaked softly with the swing. Brody backed away, hard hammering, and then saw it. The tree beside the corpse, bark burned with a message seared deep and angry. 1 for the fire. 9 to go, asterisk, asterisk. He didn't scream. He couldn't. But when he stumbled back into camp, pale and shaking, the others rose like dogs startled from sleep. "What do you mean he's hangin'?" barked Lowen, already reaching for his pistol. "Smell your boots. You'll know what he means," muttered Cade, eyes wide, voice raw. The firelight now seemed too bright, the shadows too thick. The cracklings sounded like footsteps. Kane's boys, once proud and cruel, suddenly clung to their rifles like children with night terrors. Panic pulsed like a drumbeat. They doused the fire half-lit, kicked dirt in all directions, and split. 5 heading west to the bluff, 3 north toward the pass, the rest scattering like buckshot. Elias smiled. He moved through the dark like he belonged to it. 2 days later, Cade was found strung between 2 pines, upside down, his face purple and swollen. Oil dripped from his hair, and his belt had been branded with the name Ruth. They didn't bury him. They left him hanging and ran. Each day brought a new body, silent, terrifying in its precision. No gunfire, no brawls, just sudden absence, followed by screams or discovery. One had a rope tied so tight it cut into bone. Another was pinned to a tree with iron nails through each hand. One poor bastard was burned to death with oil drawn from his own saddlebag. No notes, no mercy. It was never loud. It was never rushed. Every kill was a whisper against the thunder of their fear. At night, the wind carried Elias' old memories like a fever. He'd been younger then, 17 when the war conscripted him, barely tall enough to wear the coat they gave him. But they didn't need height. They needed silence, precision. He was sent behind enemy lines with a knife, a map, and orders whispered by men too ashamed to speak them aloud. He remembered a house in Georgia, a barn, a sobbing man nailed to the floor, a candle guttering beside his head. He remembered his own hands, steady young, covered in blood that didn't feel like it belonged to anyone anymore. And he remembered his mother, waiting at the gate when he came home, staring at him like she didn't know if he was her boy or a revenant. She never asked what he did in the war. He never told her. She just made him promise to never go back to it. He never meant to break that promise. But they broke something first. Now he moved without hesitation, without pity. He knew how long a man could hang before death took him. He knew how to silence footsteps with padded boots, how to make a tripwire from brush and bone. The Kane gang had fought soldiers, outlaws, and sheriffs. But they'd never fought a ghost that knew where they'd sleep and how they'd die. Jude, the youngest of them, only 20, fast with a knife but soft in the eyes, ran. He didn't even look back when he left his saddle. Just rode a stolen mule through the canyon edge, dust and tears mixing on his face. He'd seen what Elias left behind. He couldn't unsee it. When he reached Kane's stronghold, a big, loaded ranch house set up near the dry salt river, he was wild-eyed and shaking, blood on his boots, bile on his shirt. Kane listened to his story with a smirk. The ex-captain had gone fat over the years, belly spilling over a stolen cavalry belt, hands dripping in stolen rings. His beard was gray now, thick and matted, but his voice still cut like steel across wood. "So he's talking out my boys." Kane laughed, mouthful of grease and tobacco. "That milk-eyed goat herder?" Jude nodded, breath catching. "Sir, he's not what they said. He ain't right. He moves like he's not even breathing. He's making examples. He's got a list." Kane stood, spit, and slammed a bottle against the floor. "Then let him come. Let him knock on this goddamn door." He turned to the other men. 6 left, drunk or pretending not to be afraid. "You're letting ghosts scare you." Kane growled. "I don't care if he's got hell riding in his coat. He shows up here. We burn him like we burned the hag." He looked Jude in the eye. "We'll hang his name on a post right beside hers." And just like that, the laughter came back, shaky, thin, but there. The kind of laugh that only lives inside men who don't know they're already dead. Outside, far beyond the glow of Kane's porch lanterns, the stars blinked cold and quiet, and something moved through the brush without a sound, counting steps, measuring rope, and listening for that voice. Kane didn't know it yet, but justice had already set foot on his land. Gray Mesa stirred like an old dog, sensing a coming storm. Windows shut early, whispers snaked down alleys, and the smell of kerosene crept into the wood grain of every doorstep. The sky hung low with heat and threat, and the people looked to the saloon like they always had, not for drink, but for strength. Delilah Quinn stood behind the bar, sleeves rolled up, hands busy packing cartridges into a wooden box older than the town itself. She didn't shake. Her eyes were sharp, her jaw set. She'd seen the way smoke curled too thick over the canyon that morning. The kind of smoke that meant vengeance, not campfire. The sheriff, old Reed McKinley, stood nearby, twisting his mustache like it held the answers he didn't. "You sure this ain't just ghost stories?" he muttered, voice thin with doubt. Delilah didn't look up. "You think a ghost hangs men and brands their names into cedar?" He hesitated. "I think a man like Kane's gonna come here looking for someone to bleed." She finally met his eyes. "Then we bleed him first." By sundown, the orphans were hidden in the cellar of the chapel, guarded by Widow Elkins and a preacher who hadn't raised his voice since the war. The shopkeepers boarded up their windows, rifles laid across counters, once meant for flour and nails. The undertaker opened both sides of his wagon and cleaned his tools with reverence. Every able hand in gray Mesa stood ready, not brave, not reckless, just tired of being afraid. Elias came just before dark. He didn't knock, just staggered onto Delilah's porch like a dying wind, one hand clutching his ribs, the other dragging a sack that left a trail of dried blood behind him. His eyes were sunken, face gray as ash, lips cracked open in a whisper that never found voice. Delilah opened the door before he could fall. She caught him beneath the arms and eased him inside. No questions, no fuss. Laid him on the couch and worked by lantern light, stitching a jagged line across his side, pouring whiskey down his throat between silences. He didn't flinch once, just stared at the ceiling like it held old memories. When she was done, he finally spoke. "They're coming." She nodded. "We know." He reached inside the sack and pulled out a belt of nails, a length of twine, a bloodstained coil of wire. Tools, not weapons. His hands moved slow, as if trying to remember something buried too long. Delilah sat beside him and pulled out a rifle wrapped in linen, long and dark, the kind a man wouldn't carry unless he was serious about reaching someone far away. "This was Jack's," she said softly. "He bought it the year we married. Carved his initials into the stock with his thumbnail. Kane shot him behind the granary for saying no to a bag of beans." Elias looked at her for a long time, then nodded once, slow and solemn. He took the rifle like it was sacred. For hours they worked. He showed her how to loop tripwires between water troughs and stair rails, how to rig a lantern to blind a man coming through a door, how to listen for bootsteps on gravel and not floorboard. She listened, learned quickly. She didn't ask who taught him. She didn't need to. Night swallowed the town. They came just past midnight. 5 of them left, Kane riding at the center like a bloated king, shotgun resting across his pommel. Their horses kicked up dust that sparkled under moonlight, and their torches painted orange streaks along the walls. They didn't hide their noise. They wanted fear to answer the door before they knocked. "Delilah." Kane's voice rang out, thick and cruel. "We know you're in there, harlot. You and your little pet ghost." Elias had already climbed the church steeple. He lay prone across the wood planks, Jack's rifle cradled against his cheek, breathing steady. Below him, the gang moved like wolves, too slow, too proud. He fired once. The man to Kane's left dropped before the echo faded, his chest punched in by lead. Another turned to run and met the same end. The third dropped to a knee, panicked, eyes searching the dark, but the bullet took him in the throat. The fourth made it behind the trough, screaming for mercy. Elias waited. In the saloon, Delilah crouched behind the bar, double barrel clutched to her chest. The floor creaked. She didn't breathe. Another creak. Then the door exploded open, and a man twice her size thundered through, axe in hand. She fired one barrel into his chest. It slowed him but didn't stop him. He lunged forward, catching her shoulder with the flat of the axe. She went down hard. He grinned, mouth red, raised the axe again. The second barrel sent him crashing into the shelf behind the bar, bottles raining down like glass rain. She sat there panting, blood in her mouth, eyes wide. Kane bolted. He didn't shout, didn't curse, just turned his horse and kicked it hard, riding west into the hills, firelight chasing his back. Elias saw him from the steeple and rose, legs stiff, ribs burning. He climbed down without a word, rifle still warm. His boots hit the dirt like punctuation. Delilah met him at the edge of the street, bleeding but upright. She looked him over, then nodded toward the trail. "He's yours." Elias walked. The town stood silent behind him, watching the last ghost fade into darkness. As the hill swallowed him and the stars stretched wider than miles, he whispered into the cold. Only one rope left. The canyon swallowed sound the way the earth drinks blood, slow, without ceremony. Moonlight hung thin over the jagged stone, and down in the hollow, where the old church leaned broken against time, a single lantern flickered through shattered glass. Kane's horse lay dead at the entrance, chest riddled with thorns and bruises from a panicked fall. The man himself paced behind what used to be the altar, shotgun in hand, muttering curses to the wind and laughing between them like madness had taken root. "Come on then," he roared into the dark. "Ain't no goats to tend here, boy. No mother to hide behind. Just me and the truth." The silence that answered him wasn't empty. It was waiting. "You ain't got it in you." Kane spat. "You were a farmer. Just a quiet, little nothing. What? You thought you could turn shadow. Thought you could scare me." From the blackened doorway, Elias stepped into the light. He looked like ash come walking, coat ripped, face bloodied, skin pale and gray. His left arm hung limp. His right gripped a rifle like it was part of him. He didn't blink. Kane leveled the shotgun. "One shot'll take your head clean." Elias spoke. "I was a shadow once," he said, voice quiet as a grave. "You gave me a reason to step back into it." The gun fired. Elias ducked, rolled across the stone floor, and came up with a blade in hand, steel flashing like lightning. Kane dropped the shotgun and swung a fist like a hammer. The blow caught Elias in the jaw, sent him staggering. Blood spilled from his lip. He didn't stop. They crashed through pews, through dust and splinters, fists and fury, and bone against bone. Kane was bigger, heavier, still strong despite the gut. Elias was quicker, sharper, filled with a calm kind of hate that didn't burn, it froze. Kane slammed him against the pulpit, but Elias twisted free and drove his elbow into Kane's throat. The man gagged, spit flying, and fell to one knee. Elias staggered back, clutching his ribs, breath ragged. "You think she'd be proud of this?" Kane coughed. "Your precious mother. This what she wanted." Elias didn't answer. He stepped forward, ducked a wild swing, and struck the side of Kane's skull with the butt of his knife. The outlaw dropped like a felled tree, groaning, out cold. Elias stood over him for a long while. Then he moved. He dragged Kane's bulk toward the rafters, where time had left the beams mostly intact. From his coat, Elias pulled a coil of rope, fresh, thick, knotted with a soldier's precision. He looped it slow, deliberate, tying it with hands that had done this too many times for it to tremble. He hoisted Kane up until the outlaw dangled unconscious, boots twitching a foot from the floor. Elias reached into his coat one final time and removed a scrap of parchment. On it, in rough but steady handwriting, were 4 words. "This is for her." He pinned it to Kane's shirt with the blade of the knife, then turned. The oil came next, soaked into wood and cloth, and broken hymnals. It pooled around the altar and beneath Kane's boots. Elias lit a match and stood still for just a moment as the flame flickered in his hand. He didn't look back when he dropped it. The fire caught quick, greedy, dancing up the dry walls, swallowing Kane's groans, reaching for heaven like a sermon in smoke. The heat surged as Elias stepped out into the night, his silhouette framed by a cathedral of fire. He walked to the edge of the canyon, climbed onto his horse, an old, worn creature with eyes like his, and rode into the wind before the dawn could find him. Days passed. Delilah found the church still smoking, the ruins blackened and quiet. She said nothing as she walked the perimeter, nothing as she found the note, nothing as she fed it to the flames. She stood alone beneath the crossbeam, now split and hollow, and whispered something only the ash could hear. Elias Boone was never seen again in Gray Mesa. Some said he rode south, into the borderlands, chasing rumors of other devils. Others claimed he became one with the desert itself. Bones and blood turned to sand and myth. A few swore he settled by the river and built a house that no one could find unless they truly needed it. But the children, the children, they remembered. They whispered stories under quilts, told tales around fires, pointed to the hills and said, "That's where the ghost with the rope came from." They said he didn't wear a badge, didn't carry gold, didn't smile or cry, just watched, waited. and burned wickedness to the ground. And when one child asked why he never stayed, why he didn't live among them after he'd saved the town, the answer came from the oldest voice in the room. Some heroes wear 10 stars. Others ride silence like a saddle and leave fire in their wake.